Founder of PeopleSec, expert social engineer, and experienced pen tester, Joshua Crumbaugh.
At all? There we are. Okay. All right. Looks like we're good. So, today we are going to talk about how to secure your users. Or rather, how to patch stupid. How many people in here have heard you can't patch stupid? So everyone, so you're all CEHs? This is actually one of my pet peeves. I hear it constantly, you can't patch stupid. So that brings me to my first slide. If this thing's going to work, hold on. There we are. If you've decided you're going to fail from the very beginning, if you say you can't patch stupid, guess what? You're going to get exactly what you said. You're not going to be able to patch stupid. So what I want is, first of all, to say, I can patch stupid. And it's not about stupid. It really isn't. See, we're all in information security, and yes, we see the end users as stupid very often. But the reality is, this isn't their expertise. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But we can patch stupid, and that's what I'm here to talk about. Real quickly, about me, I am the CEO of PeopleSec. I'm an accomplished social engineer. I've quite literally talked my way into bank vaults. Casino money cages, that's one that gets the adrenaline pumping real quickly. Fortune 500 data centers, stuff like that. I'm an experienced pen tester. I've done a lot of red teaming, and I have a perfect record of getting in and getting domain admin. Now, I don't say that to brag. I say that because we have a major problem with users that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. If it wasn't for users, I probably wouldn't have. Real quickly, a little bit of, all you pen testers or security engineers or incident response people, you travel a lot. So, real quickly, if you want to have some fun and you want to feel like a badass when you get onto the airplane, sit in the aisle seat, make sure to board a little bit early, and then any big guy that gets on the airplane, make eye contact with them and don't break it. And here's what's going to happen. This big guy, he's going to go and look straight down at the ground, and you're going to feel like a badass. So, I had a little bit of fun, way off subject. So, real quickly, I got a video here. Actually, we have not tested audio, so hopefully this works. Give me half a second. So, the other day, with my family, we're watching Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. And this particular scene made me laugh because it reminded me of cybersecurity in general. I feel like this is our network status or our security status in general. So at the end, I want anyone who can appreciate this and feels like that's their network security right now to just raise their hand, okay? Let me play this.
This door has been installed with top-of-the-line security system. You can't get inside unless you have 19 keys, 3 combinations, 2 fingerprints, and 1 optical scan. Or, as I share with my most trusted associates, turning this doorknob right here.
Okay, so hands. Anyone sort of feel like that's their current state of security? All right. So here's the problem. All of these amazing security controls can easily be bypassed. We can have every single security control that the vendors out here have, maybe not all of them, but most of them anyway, and by targeting users, you can easily bypass these security controls. So back to, I said, perfect track record. We've always gotten domain admin. We've always gotten in. And here's the thing. You could have any remotely exploitable vulnerability on your perimeter. And guess what? I don't care. I do not give a shit, and I'm not going to go after it. And here's why. Your perimeter puts me into the DMZ. I don't want to be into the DMZ. I want to be on your user LAN. That's where your data is. That's where your good stuff is. And that is where the security controls are a lot less likely to catch me because I can move around in plain sight all day long pretending to be a user. Maybe I mask my traffic and make it seem like it's Pandora or somebody shopping for shoes on Amazon. That's going to show up in your SIM, but you're not going to notice it because it's an informational. Couple things about users. First of all, it's a better network. That's where everyone wants to be. So why are you going to target the perimeter when you can target the users? It gives you guaranteed access into the network. And on top of that, you're at the place that you want to be. You don't have to migrate and risk getting caught to privilege escalate or, well, hold on, accidentally clicked the button, or be able to move into another network or pivot. So users are a gigantic problem. And I see so much emphasis being put on the perimeter, and it sort of concerns me because I don't see a whole lot of emphasis being put on the user. And until we solve the user, we have low-hanging fruit. And as anyone in this room knows, the attackers are going to go after what first? Yes, the low-hanging fruit. All right. So this is part of an overall series. We're very ambitious. We haven't figured it all out yet, but this is part of the Human SAM, or Human Security Assurance Maturity Model. Our goal is to one day address every single element of human security. Right now, we've tackled the biggest issue, social engineering attacks against the end user. And it's our opinion that humans are the source, the problem, the root cause of all cyber incidents. So, I've had a lot of people be like, well, I don't know. I mean, only 90% of incidents are started by phishes. Well, phishes aren't the only human error. I once, during a pen test, and this one of my favorite stories, because we end up getting domain admin within 1 hour of starting the penetration test. And the reason is because our trusted agent, who was also their head of IT, is a decent-sized company, but they didn't have an InfoSec department at the time. And they decided they're going to install a new self-password reset tool, Manage Engine. So they put it in their perimeter on their DMZ, and they leave default credentials on it. Not only do they leave default credentials on it, but they self-populate. I didn't even have to look up what the default password was because it was self-populated. I just clicked login. So then I get in there, and it says, would you like to sync your credentials with a database? Obviously, yes. So we set up an Oracle database in AWS, and we sync everything over, and we have every single password in their database. Now all we have to do is start cracking, or passing the hash. So this, to me, is a big issue. Here's a couple examples of some of the problems that you might find with users. Obviously, the main ones, clicking on phishes, opening malicious attachments, tailgating. Tailgating is a big one. You walk up to almost any company, and you have 2 cups of coffee in your hand. That's the only prop you need, and people will start opening the door for you. They will let you in on their badge swipe, and that's an issue. Leaving default credentials. Or, one that really gets me, giving your users local admin access. Do your users really need local admin? So, there's so many things that are at the heart of, or that are human-based. Every single incident is human-based. Even these vulnerabilities, like perimeter, let's take SQL injection. It's the developer that is unaware of security that wrote that bad code. So if we can do better with our humans, we can achieve real security. There are so many amazing security controls out there, and the only reason they're not effective is because we're not doing enough to deal with our humans. So I'm going to skip through that. Before I get into the I guess, meat of this presentation, I want to say it's not going to be easy to secure your users. You're going to have to make a dedicated effort. You're going to have to put in a lot of time or a lot of money or both if you really want to secure your users. You have to make an investment into them. So, the first thing when we created our technology, and today, before I get into that, today is all about how to empower your do-it-yourself training program. I'm not trying to sell my product or anything. If you want it, awesome. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that your program is more effective. And you can make it very effective just by simply avoiding a few common mistakes. So the first thing we did when we created this, so these users are the root cause of the problem. And I didn't want to treat symptoms anymore. I sort of got sick of the madness in cybersecurity. This insane amount of investment, year after year, billions more are spent on cybersecurity, yet we have more breaches. That is not right. That's not how it should be happening. We need to be lowering the amount of breaches year to year, and users are the problem. So we looked at security awareness programs, and we said, well, what are the problems with current security awareness programs? What is making them fail? And so one of the first things we honed in on is binge training. Now, I'm not saying binge training is bad, but if all you're using is binge training, you are setting yourself up for failure. There's a ton of reasons that binge training won't work. Well, it won't work in and of itself. But here's a couple of them. The average user has an attention span of 8 seconds. Now that it's a little bit crazy, but we live in a social media world, a world of 144 characters and 8-second videos. And yet our training, our education, still tends to be 1-2 hours. We cover 100 different subjects during it, and we want the user to remember everything. So we have a lot of problems here because what happens is you have a number of different things. First, anyone in this room might find that hour-long training very patronizing and annoying and sort of demeaning to you because you understand cybersecurity. Why do you need to be talked to about, how to create a good password? And actually, most of that education is bad because they're saying 8 characters and, make it complex and use special characters. That's bad advice, by the way. Make it long. I care about length. Length adds entropy, so special characters and all that does add a little bit, but not nearly as much entropy as adding more characters. So if you don't want the bad guys to be able to crack your password, make it at least 12 characters. And don't make it something that's easy to guess. We actually have a fun video we're going to play a little bit later about that. But there's other problems with binge training. These users tend to relapse. So we have the best user. Man, he listened or she listened to everything that you taught during your 1 hour, 2 hour training program. And they really digested it, right? And they don't click on anything. And they're a secure user. And they create a great password. But then 3 or 4 months passes. And all of a sudden, it's no longer present in mind. It's no longer front of mind. And so what happens is that they become laxed. And even the best user who learned the most from our binge training is now a security risk to the company. So in order to do better, we need to keep security front of mind. Now, I recently was talking with a client, and they said, our executives have mandated that we can't spend more than 1 hour a year on user education. And this troubles me a little bit, but it leads to a really great question. So, if you can only spend 1 hour per year on education, which do you think is going to be more effective? 1 60-minute training session or 60 1-minute training sessions? Yeah, you're able to constantly keep it in front of them and make sure that security is front of mind. And then before I move forward, another really big issue with binge training is the lack of frequency. It tends to be once, maybe twice a year, and threats aren't evolving once or twice a year. How often do threats evolve? Daily. So we can't properly address the threats attacking our organization if we're only training on a once or twice a year basis. We have got to be constantly educating our users. Which brings me to the next big thing that we found being a problem in almost every security awareness training program. Poor metrics. One of the things that I see all the time is most corporations are looking at their phishing susceptibility risk in a very linear way. It's, we sent a phish, did the user click yes or no? So a really cool thing that I learned when we signed our first client was that these baselines or these single phishing exercises, or actually with us, we said we're going to do the best baseline, and we created 3 phishes of varying degrees of complexity. 1 spearfish, 1 very complicated mass fish, and then 1 moderately difficult phish. And we thought this is really going to tell us who your risk users are. Can you guess what? We were wrong. We were very wrong. We, in that first baseline, found approximately 40% of the risk users. That was it. 40%. In month 1, we actually identified more risk users by doing continuous phishing and continuous baselining than we ever did during the baseline. And it wasn't until we were 100 days in that we actually had identified almost all of the risk users. And even then, not all of them. But we got most of them by 100 days in of constant phishing, constant baselining. So if we're only trying to evaluate our risk once a month, once a quarter, whenever, we're not going to identify everybody. And that means we're leaving gaps in our perimeter, and we are the low-hanging fruit. You know, another thing is, there's so much we can measure, and I would say anything. If you can imagine it, measure it, because it's probably valuable if you even thought about it in the first place. But this is where I like to ask everybody. So I would love to get a show of hands. Anyone who can articulate and has a risk established for every user in their organization, raise their hand. See, this is scary. I don't see a single hand. Why do we assign risk to our servers, our endpoints, and we're looking at all these vulnerabilities? We rank them high, medium, and low so we can prioritize. That'll get me off on a tangent. I won't start yet. But by the way, remediate your low-level findings. I've gotten domain admin more times off of low findings than I ever have off of high findings. Seriously, remediate your low findings. So many companies, they only do high and medium. And lows, like, I don't know, SMB signing, will give somebody domain admin like that. In fact, you can do a set it and forget it attack, SMB relay. But there's other things. I hear everyone talk about this human firewall, but all they're trying to do is block stuff. To me, if we want to have a human firewall, shouldn't we also be reporting? Shouldn't our users be telling us when they get phished? See, that's a human firewall to me. It's not just stopping the attacks, it's finding the attacks quickly. And your end users, your users are the best line of defense that you have, or your biggest vulnerability. So we want to turn our biggest vulnerability into our biggest asset. Other stuff. What about user retention? We talked about the user earlier that paid attention to everything that they were taught. And they were very diligent for a little bit, but then they lapse. So what if one of these metrics we're looking at is how long the user remembers what they've learned before they're going to relapse. So maybe we learned that this user at 90 days has a potential to relapse. So maybe the next time when we get to 60 days, we can increase the frequency of their education, and we can increase the frequency of their phishing or attack simulations. And so now we have prevented that user from relapsing completely. We can be very proactive if we have good numbers. Another thing, people in this industry, and I'm going to pick on the whole industry here. There is so much success celebrated prematurely. You do a phishing exercise and no one clicks, and all of a sudden you have a 0% risk rate. I promise you, you're wrong. One phish will not tell you anything about your risk. In the Defense Department, they use what's called weighted risk over time. And that's going to give you a much better idea of what your overall risk is when it comes to your users. We personally use the PERT model. I don't care which one you use, but don't assume that because no one clicks on a single phish, that you are no longer susceptible. You are, and that next phish you send might get 100 clicks or 1,000 clicks. And how many clicks do I need if I'm a bad guy and I'm attacking your organization? How many people do I need to click? Just one. There we are. So if I am accepting 2% of my users, or even 1% of my users, still clicking on things, and I consider that acceptable risk, do you think that that really represents 1 or 2% of your risk? So that 1 or 2% of employees, were they not the worst employees to begin with? Were they not the ones that click on absolutely everything? Were they not the ones that are constantly causing you malware outbreaks? Are they not the ones that cause those 7-figure ransomware incidents? These are our highest risk users. And it's sort of like the 80-20 rule, only 80-20 is sort of a very low number. Because this small fraction of your user base accounts for a significant portion of your risk. 2% could represent 40% of your risk, because they are the ones that are always causing the problems. So we have to do better. I'm going to move forward, otherwise I'm going to run out of time here. But we need to be measuring a lot. And before I do that, I want to mention one more thing about risk, and that is phishes. 2 phishes are not the same. So I'll give you the example of one phish. It's a highly complex spear phish. They managed to get their hands on your signature, your corporate signature. So they've got the perfect signature there. They even bought a malicious domain to use that is a perfect replica of your domain, and it's going to trick everybody. And then we've got another phish, and it's a Nigerian-style scam. I got a new one the other day. It was very interesting and intriguing. And it says, hey, I'm an executive from ExxonMobil, and I've embezzled $5 million. And I need your help getting this money out of the country. All I need is your bank account information. It was a very unique one. I loved the fact that they went with the criminal element. Like it actually, I'm guessing, probably was one of the more successful Nigerian-style scams. But those 2 phishes, they are not equal. They are not the same. If your users click on the highly complex spearfish, that doesn't necessarily make them a giant risk to your company, because it was very complex, and they would have to have a very advanced user level to avoid it. Whereas if they click on this Nigerian-style scam and they really think they won the lottery, or they're really willing to help this Exxon executive who just embezzled millions of dollars, they are a risk user. They're a problem. So we can't assume that all phishes are the same. We need better metrics. We've actually developed a scoring model for every single phish. It's available on our HumanSab website, I think. If not, we'll make sure it is right afterwards. But we've developed a scoring model so that you can assess the difficulty of phishes, and that'll help you get better metrics on your individual user risk. So let's move on to the next point. And this is a pet peeve of mine. These programs are all, or almost all, security awareness training programs. They're one size fits all. So what happens is you're educating to a median user or an average user. It's not an education for the most secure users, and it's definitely not education for your least secure users. You're sort of in the middle, and you're not able to do as much as you need to with your high-risk users, and you're doing way more than you need to with your low-risk users. So in business, what is the holy grail? Being able to do more with less, right? That's what everyone wants. And in education, this is an area where we can absolutely do more with less. Why don't we not spend as much time educating our low-risk users? Maybe we just monitor them and make sure they stay low risk. And then, guess what? When we go to executives and we say, I need to send 6 emails over the next 2 weeks to this high-risk user to help get them to stop clicking on things, you're going to get permission because that is 1 or 2% of your overall user base, and you have become more efficient with your low-risk users. So we've got to stop making it one size fits all, and we need to make it individual. You can accomplish a lot more, and this is one of the biggest keys here. You can't do it without getting better metrics and measuring everything, but once you do, you can use that data to customize training programs to the individual. You can identify that maybe they are 10 times more likely to click a phish that is security related. Or maybe business communications phishes are the ones that are going to get them. And so now that I know that, we can focus on that and we can provide education about that. So these one-size-fits-all programs are highly ineffective. And I'm behind. So I better hurry up. The next one is, no one wants to get their hands dirty. We're relying on technology to fix a human problem. And technology can take us a long way. We use technology to customize training programs to the individual user. We have an awesome AI. But that's not enough. We have to also get our hands dirty once in a while. We need to engage the user. One of the things is that a lot of users see cybersecurity as this thing that only geniuses understand. So congratulations, you're all geniuses. But the reality is, sometimes a simple phone call makes all the difference in the world. A human connection. And it doesn't have to be rude. It's actually, we try to use carrots before we ever use sticks. But we call up and we say, hey, we noticed that you've been having some difficulties in the attack emulations we've been doing. And we also saw that you're, a high-risk user. You've been a high-risk user now for a couple months. And we were just calling to touch base. We're not mad at you. We're here to work with you. We just wanted to touch base and see if you had any questions that we might be able to answer. And what happens is that there's now a human connection. And because there's a human connection, now this impossible thing that only geniuses can understand becomes something that they're like, okay, I can do my part. It's not that difficult to notice some red flags. And it's all because we made a human connection. There's another thing about human connections. One of the other crazy things I learned when we started doing this was that there are a lot of business processes causing your user risk. It's not always the user that's the problem. Sometimes it's your processes. So what happens is when we find a group of users in a specific department that are all susceptible, we bring them into a room. Not all of them, but a bunch of them. And we start asking questions. We have what we call a focus group. We do it sort of just like marketing. In fact, we do most of it just like marketing because the same rules apply. But we bring them into a room and we start asking questions. And it never ceases to amaze me at what we learn. And more often than not, when a particular department has a high level of susceptibility, it is not the user that's the problem. It's your business processes. But now that we understand this, we can address it. We can fix the problem. But if we had never called them into the room, if we had never got our hands dirty, if we had never worked with the end user, we wouldn't know that. Ooh. Those buttons are easy to click. So I'm going to jump forward. I'm going to run out of time. Another thing is, how many people in here do phishing exercises at least once a year? Okay, I see a lot of hands. That's good. Unfortunately, not enough hands. What about once a quarter? A few less hands. What about once a month? Quite a few less hands. What about once a week? And almost no hands. Do you think the bad guys aren't targeting your users once a week? I mean, we could be in their inbox, or only the bad guys can. So we need to do more phishing. I'm going to get into that in a bit. Now, when you phish your users, do you exploit them? Do you ask them to, do you actually continue the attack and ask them to fill out their password or give you their password or run an attachment? I'm serious. Do you guys exploit your users? Okay, I'm seeing some hands. Now, if I'm in a pen test, I want to exploit my users. But a corporate phishing program is not about exploitation. It's about education. So at the moment that mistake is realized, this user is uniquely susceptible to learning. So when they hit the landing page, we need to educate them. We don't need to exploit them. So I don't care if they run an attachment. I don't care if they give me their password. Because if they clicked on that link, it's already game over. I could have a 0 day. Or more likely, you just didn't patch everything. You have an outdated version of Flash or Adobe or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Once they click the link, it's game over. So we don't have to see if they'll take it to the next level. What we need to do is educate them at that point. You know, another thing that we do that I don't see enough of is if you were to click on a phishing exercise that we send you, before you get back to your inbox, there's an email there. It says, hey, you just clicked on a phishing or an attack emulation. And here are the red flags that you missed. And hint, hint, the next phishing emulation we're going to do is going to have some of the same red flags. And so now we've connected it. We've educated them. We've told them what the red flags are so they can avoid making these same mistakes in the future. And we even told them that the next fish they get is going to have the same red flags. So now what are they going to do? They're going to be vigilant. They're going to be watching for these red flags. And it's this just-in-time education that gets them engaged. So we need to not exploit our users unless it's a pen test or a red team exercise. But if it's a part of education, let's use it to educate our users and tie or anchor that lesson that we're trying to teach them into their memory. So the next thing one of the things we're going to talk about is boring content. Oh, wait, I just missed it. Okay. So the next one is, guys, these programs are so boring. We might have been on the slide for a while. I don't know. I wasn't paying enough attention. I was just talking. But most things are boring. And I'm going to pick on SANS, but I want to say before I do that we were very impressed with SANS. We were inspired by SANS because they took these 60-minute educational things and they pulled them down to 4 minutes. The problem is that's 4 very boring minutes. And they're covering a lot of topics. So I don't think we need to cover so many topics. We need to cover one topic and cover it well. So here's an example of a video. It's one of the ones that we use, but here's an example of how you can make it better. And everything that we do is under 1 minute. And I would argue you can do the same. And especially with YouTube and everything that you have out there, there's so much that you can use to do better at education. But let's try and keep everything under a minute. Here's an example of a video that hopefully is going to get a lot of laughs.
Your account has been hacked. Somebody guessed your password.
Well, how did they know? I picked something so random.
Was it dolphin?
I've got to take this. Hello?
So can I get some volunteers to give me the takeaways? What did you learn just now?
Change my password from dolphin.
So don't use a predictable password, something that's dictionary based and easily guessable. What else did you learn? There you are. It's funny. I don't know how many of you have seen that graphic. I don't have it here. I wish I did. But it's all about how we've created these passwords that no human can remember and any computer can guess. And the reality is, passphrases are so much better. So with my clients, I always advocate eliminate your complexity requirements. Just get rid of them, but increase the length requirements. How about instead of making it required 8-character password with an upper and lowercase, letter and a number or a special character, why don't we just make it 12 characters? We don't care. Maybe 14 characters. We're going to be better. One of the guaranteed ways into almost any corporation is what I call either a reverse brute force or password spraying, depending on what lingo you use. But most people, when they think of brute force, they're thinking of guessing a bunch of passwords against one user. But that's not what the bad guys are doing. They're guessing one password against a bunch of users. And now I'm guaranteed to get access. So right now, this time of year, I'm going to guess spring 2017 or summer 2017 as the password. And guess what? I will get into your organization because you're going to have a ton of users with that password. So passwords are a problem. I digress. Let's move forward. The next one is we're not phishing our users enough. So if nothing else, you need to phish your users. There's not a single user that is part of my educational program that gets less than 2 phishes per month. It's what we call ongoing baselining. You constantly have to be assessing risk. So let's, for instance, take the user that might even be part of your InfoSec team. They're a secure user. They're always very vigilant. And they're one of your best assets. But some personal problems at home. Their wife asked for a divorce. And now their mind's somewhere else. And our secure user just turned into a security risk. But if we're only phishing once a year, we don't know that this user is now a security risk. Maybe they're a domain admin. And maybe they just fell into a high-risk user group. But if we only phish once a year, we don't know. We can't revoke their domain admin access until they do things right. So if you take nothing else away from this, please phish your users at least twice a month. That's sort of the magic number that we found, and that's for low-risk users. If you've got a high-risk user who likes to click on things, why don't you phish them 6 times a month, 7 times a month? I mean, the bad guys are in their inbox, so we should be in their inbox. Better hurry. How much time do I have left? Oh, okay, we're good. All right, I thought I only had 45 minutes. I guess I have longer. Awesome. So, another thing is that we're not motivating our employees enough. I think one of the biggest problems with security awareness is that we're not doing enough to motivate the unmotivated. It sounds like an impossible task. How do we get the person who doesn't care or doesn't understand the risk they pose to the organization to do better? Well, the first thing I like to do is make sure that user is aware of their place in the corporation. Are they part of the solution or are they part of the problem? If they're part of the problem, I'm going to tell them. When they're part of the solution, I'm going to tell them that too. So it's sort of a system of sticks and carrots, but all we're doing is saying, hey, you're now considered a high-risk user. This is a problem. We need to do something about this. Or, hey, you've done great. You are one of our lowest risk users. We're proud of you. These things make a difference. We need to let them know their status. Other things, we actually deploy what we call scareware. It's a fun one. So we've got 2 different variations of it. One of my favorites is, so the first time they run it, all it does is convince them that it is hacking their computer and it's encrypting everything or destroying everything, and it's spreading to every computer on the network. And it's, green text and a black screen, changes their background. I mean, it's all kinds of scary. But that creates an emotional response. And as we discussed, when we can tie any educational lesson into emotion, we're going to get a better retention. So the next time they run it, this is actually my favorite, it just puts these pop-ups that they're on top of everything. You can't get rid of them without going through each and every pop-up. It has 13 different pop-ups that say stuff like, hey, it's really not a good idea to run an executable from, online, from a site you don't know, from a person that you don't know, from an email you weren't expecting. Bad idea. And they have to click, I understand. And then it goes through 13 different messages and they have to click, I understand, I understand, I understand, until they get through it. It's a frustration. It's annoying, but it's an emotion. And we're tying that in. We're anchoring it in and we're getting our message across. Another one is with our landing pages. Let's keep the message simple and let's invoke an emotional response. I'm going to show you an example in just a bit here, but we can use our landing pages to invoke a better emotional response with them. And that's one of the ways that we're going to help motivate the unmotivated. But here's the next thing. The bad guys are using social engineering to get your users to do stupid things. Why can't we use social engineering to get our users to do smart things? Social engineering is a powerful thing. So there's a lot that we can do to help get these employees more motivated. I'm going to keep going or I'm going to run out of time here. But we're not doing enough to create sustained vigilance. And so earlier I was saying a human firewall should not just block, but it should detect. And in the ideal world, our employees are telling us when they get phished. And what can we do when an employee tells us they got phished? Maybe 2 employees got the same phish. Now we know it's potentially a targeted attack. So the best way to make sure that no one's clicking on that is to make sure that they see the attack from you first. So if we go and we send that attack to everybody, and they see it from us, and if they click on it, they get one of our educational landing pages, and they learn their lesson. Now when they get the in the wild attack, they're not going to click. So when we identify these different phishes that are attacking organizations, we need to immediately, as quickly as possible, deploy a phish against them. One of the things we do for our clients is that if they're getting targeted attacks, we immediately phish their entire users with that. And we recently had that. So one of our clients calls us up and they say, hey, we just had over 100 of our users get phished with the exact same phish. It wasn't even a great one, but it definitely caused it was a 7-figure incident. Just like that. It was just nothing but ransomware. And so we immediately phished their users. And this attack that at the time they called us had been going on for a few days was almost immediately nullified. It was done. No one else was clicking on it because we had prepared them to deal with that attack. And so that's why phishing is so important. We can do more to get them ready. Another thing is, and I think this is a key point when it comes to patching stupid, is that it's not all about education. It's not all about creating smart users. In fact, one of the biggest, most important things is conditioning your users. Conditioning is going to help make them prepared. Conditioning, when they assume that every malicious email that comes in is from the IT security department, and they might get an email saying they're now a high-risk user if they click on it, they're conditioned to be more careful. Now that does bring up a point. Once we condition them to not click on anything, we have to give them a way to know when it's safe to click. So we should always, every organization in here should have an alert at the top of the email telling the user if it's internal or external. Every single organization should have a standardized email signature. When you're doing education and you provide emails where you want them to click, give them a way to know it's safe. We use a personal passphrase. The first thing they do is they pick a passphrase. Might be sure, be secure, InfoSec Ninja, think before you click. And that is at the top of every email. And then we say, do you have a nickname you want to use? And we address them by their nickname. And we promise that if we're sending them a link that we want them to click on, that they will have those 2 different forms of verification. And then we work with our clients to make sure that they are standardizing signatures, that they have these alerts to let people know if it's an external email. So we have to let the users also know when it's safe to click. And this is very key because we can't affect our productivity. In business, we still have to have a productive users. So if we want productive users, we have to make sure they know when it is safe to click, as well as teaching them not to click. So this brings me to the solution, and we've talked a lot about it, so a little bit of this is going to be redundant, but I'm going to go back through it. And you can get all of this on humansam.org. It's our open source project where we are just releasing the methodologies. We don't care how you do it. We just want you to become more secure. So the first one is what we call mass customization. This is going to give you a lot of impact with your users. And it's going to give you more leadway with your executives. Those same executives that had mandated for this client of ours that they could only spend 60 minutes per year educating. That's crazy. But when we went to them and we said, well, we do things a little bit differently. See, for most of your users, we're only going to spend about 30 minutes per year educating. But there's going to be a few of your users I'm going to need a few hours with. I might need 6 hours with them. But it's going to be 1, maybe 2% of your users. Is that okay? Because they present most of your risk. So, well, absolutely. You're actually spending less time with this group, even if you do spend 6 hours, than you would have with our 1 hour mandate. And so what happened is this very frustrated InfoSec team, who had never been allowed to properly educate, was now allowed to do what they needed to do because of mass customization, because of training to the individual user need. But there's other things. You can identify trends and hone in on those trends. Maybe this particular department really likes fake invoice type, emails or something like that, and that's a common problem. So now we can do a lot more education around this particular vulnerability and this particular threat. We can do a lot more attack emulations around this particular threat. So being able to customize the individual user is key. Now, I know not everybody is going to be able to customize to the individual user. Most technologies can't support that. But what your technologies can support is at minimal a high, medium, low risk group. Why not break all your users into 3 categories, if nothing else, and educate them accordingly to that? And constantly update your list, at least once a month or once a quarter, update your lists. Update where your users are at. Because you'd be amazed. When users hit high risk and they know they hit high risk, they stop clicking like that. They start paying attention to those red flags like that. And it's because they know they're a part of the problem and because we're able to customize it to them. One thing we do, which you could do a little bit if you just have your high, medium, low risk user groups, is we actually change the tone of emails. It goes from, if you're a low risk user and you just clicked on something, maybe you just became high risk, but you were low risk before. The email sounds a little bit like this. Hey man, you've been doing a great job. You had a little bit of a rough patch, but you're really doing great. Keep up the good work and just be a little bit more diligent. But when we have a user that maybe sat 3 or 4 or 5 months in the high risk group, it gets a little bit more aggressive. And it's, hey man, come on, this is becoming a problem. You're presenting a significant amount of risk to our organization. We've got to do something about this. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the amount of attack emulations that we're going to send you over the next month. And we're going to increase the amount of education that you're going to get. And we need you to pay close attention. We're going to be watching if you're doing this, and we need you to pay close attention. Now, it's not mean, but it is definitely more aggressive. And so we don't have to use the same tone for everybody. We can customize the tone too, and that's going to help you get better results. Another thing is, for your low-risk users, you don't need to send them the Nigerian-style fish. They're not going to click on it, or hopefully not anyway. I mean, they are your low-risk users. Why don't you only send them the most difficult fishes that you have in your library on a monthly basis? Why don't you spearfish them every single month? Actually, that's a really big point, is that we're not doing enough spearfishing. I think that most companies tend to think that it's so difficult to deal with the phishing risk that they almost just give up on dealing with the spearfishing risk before they start. But if you're spearfishing your users, they're going to learn to start paying attention to red flags. and you're going to create a more successful program. So adjust accordingly and measure everything. If you can dream it up, like I said earlier, it's a valid metric. We live in a world of big data, but when it comes to user security, almost no one has any data. I am starting to see some SIMs that are starting to go down this path, and I'm very impressed. They are looking at different things on the endpoint. They're tying it to individual users and starting to assign risks to users. But earlier, I asked for a show of hands of who assigned risks to their users, and not one person in the audience raised their hand. So we can use this data, we can assign risk, and we can do a lot of really cool things if we're measuring everything. What if you have a domain admin that pops into a high-risk user group? I actually had this happen about a month ago. Coincidentally, this person is no longer a domain admin, and they shouldn't be. Your domain admins, they have the keys to the kingdom. They cannot be a risk user, and if they are, they cannot have that level of access because you're setting yourself up for a massive breach. Like I said, never once have I not been able to get domain admin. Most of the time, we get domain admin externally within 1 or 2 days. And I'm talking critical infrastructure. My team, we've taken over oil pipelines, oil rigs. The largest banks in the world, we've taken complete control just like that. We bypassed all of their security controls, and it's always because of users. So we need to be measuring these things so that we can do more with that data. Some of the other things that we might do with that data is segment our risk users off onto an isolated VLAN. When we do this, now we know they're risky. We've made sure there's no data that they have access to. We made sure that they're on their own network that probably has a ton of malware. And so by doing this, we've significantly lowered our risk. So there's so much you can do with the data. There's no way we can touch all of it right now. But get innovative. In fact, please, if you can think of something, raise your hand. Tell me. Get my business card. Email me. I want to know what types of use cases you can think of. What can you think of to measure and do off of that new analytic that you found? Next thing is we got to aspire to be more like social media. Why can't, if I were king for a day and I could make anything I wanted, I would change all of our educational programs to social media rules. 144 characters, 8 seconds or less. By the way, we actually have 10-second educational videos, so you don't have to cover a lot. So I'm going to ask, I've skipped through a couple slides that had some red text on it. What did it say? Anyone? Oh, wow. Wow, that's surprising. Well, okay, this is not helping my example here. But it said, think before you click. And the whole idea, and it's worked in every other talk, but the whole idea is that if you keep your messaging simple and you keep it to a single point that you want to get across, people are going to be more likely to remember it. Maybe I clicked through too quickly, but you can do a lot more with less. So yeah, let's aspire to make things shorter. Let's keep our educational videos under a minute. Let's try to make them entertaining. Let's not just do that, but let's integrate everywhere. Do you have elevators at your corporation? Put some security awareness on the elevator television if you have one. Put things about security awareness in your break room. Put it in the newsletter. There are a million opportunities for us to be educating users. We need to identify all of them, and this is custom to your organization. Only you know all the opportunities you have, but let's integrate everywhere because this is a major problem, and we have to be doing better. Next is fish more. Do a lot of high-frequency attacks. Like I said, the minimal that you should be doing every month, and this is really for your good users, is 2. Because users change, risk changes, situations change, family environment changes. There's a million things that can cause somebody who was a low-risk user to become a high-risk user. And even the best pen testers can become a high-risk user. There's, if you're not paying attention, you're not paying attention. It doesn't matter how much you know. So we need to be constantly assessing our user risk. Get creative with your training and be proactive. Maybe you identify that there is a particular fish targeting your industry through some threat intelligence feed that you have. How about before you get attacked, let's send that attack emulation out to everyone in our company. That way, if they see the attack in the wild, they're prepared. So the next one is the bad guys are in the inbox. Let's bring our education to the inbox. Why do they need to go log into a portal? Why do they have to log into your learning management system? I know everyone generally hates this one. No, we need our learning management system. But it's one more password for them to remember. It's one more portal and log or URL that they have to remember. And making them go log in somewhere is going to decrease the effectiveness. Let's start delivering all of our education in the inbox. We use the LMS for tracking, right? Well, marketing figured out tracking a long time ago. Tracking cookies, tracking URLs, you name it. We can track the hell out of what users are doing. We can see exactly how many seconds of the video they watch. We can have questions that we ask them to answer right afterwards to see how much they learned. So avoid the portal overload. Now, it's a big problem in InfoSec is portal overload. Most of you people in SecOps, you've got way too many dashboards and not enough time to monitor them. But it's not much different for the end user. So let's educate where the threat is. Let's get them where the attackers are. So the question I like to pose, or it's really not much of a question, it's more of a rhetorical question, is do you want the attackers to be the only one in their inbox? Or do you want to be there too? Because the attackers aren't going away anytime soon. They're in their inbox. So if we're in their inbox too, we can be much more effective. Oh, I guess I should have waited. All right. So this is an example of a landing page. Does this evoke an emotional response to you? Is this disgusting? Yeah. But the reality is, it's true. If you think that's bad, being responsible for a massive ransomware outbreak that attacks one of your main file shares is worse. You don't want to be that guy. So I don't know, I don't care if it's disgust, if it's fear, if it's humor, or if it's anger. Get an emotional response out of your users because it's going to help anchor that lesson you're trying to teach them. Get involved, use human intervention. We do one-on-one coaching if need be. You need to do one-on-one coaching. Have the focus groups. Like I said, you're going to be amazed at what you find with your focus groups because a lot of our risk is created by antiquated business processes that don't understand modern threats facing our industry. Once we identify those business processes, we can change them. But it's not just that. You might identify that these users are very particularly susceptible to one specific type of attack. And now we can address that accordingly. Create competition as much as you can. I'm going to blow through this. I want to have a little bit of time for things. I'm going to mention HR here. Everyone always says HR won't let them do anything. That's why I said measure everything. Because when you can document the risk that this user poses to the corporation, HR now becomes the worst enemy of that employee if you need to use sticks. HR is not going to tell you not to. HR will get involved, and they will be the bad guy. So you have to document it. HR is never going to get involved if you can't document why this user is a problem. So if you have good data, HR will not be a problem. As I use gamification, I'm never allowed to do this, but I still keep it in my slides because I would love to do this. I want to use shamification. I want a wall of shame at my company. I got 1 minute left. Okay, guys. In summary, real quickly, measure everything. Customize training to the individual user. Use high-frequency training. Use high-frequency attack emulations. Deliver your content to the inbox. Get personally involved and intervene as needed. Create competition. Use a system of sticks and carrots. Carrots are most effective. Try to avoid sticks. And train when the user is most receptive when that mistake is realized. Any questions?